Welcome back to another great learning video. Today we're going to talk about Data Analysis 101, which really using conditional formulas in Excel for the if, IFS, and if/or functions. We're going to start by looking at the data to understand what we're doing. It's always important to grasp what you're doing. In this case, we're trying to create a summary report for employees based on data for different cities. We're going to look at each section of the spreadsheet to understand what exactly it is that we're doing. Let me go ahead and go to spreadsheet. Now here, you see the spreadsheet has three sections. Section 1 will be the ifing section, where we will execute a COUNTIF, SUMIF, and AVERAGEIF formula. Section 2 is the IFS functions, where we will do a COUNT-IFS, SUM-IFS, AVERAGE-IFS. Section 3, we're going to build a nested if/or equation. We're going to break it to two parts and then merge the two together. So let's start with the if section. In the if section, there's three sections here. The first are total employees. So if you hit the function builder, really good for these heavy formulas, you'll see it's summing from the employee range and it's giving a criteria. So we hit the X here. So what happens in the spreadsheet is you're going to use the city as one of the criteria. Look at the conditions. Criteria for all these in this section is city. So formula type if, we're going to do a COUNTIF, SUMIF, AVERAGEIF. And if you go to data file, you'll see we have years of service, age, store, job status, salary. So in this regard, we need to create these formulas. So the best way to do this is go to total employees and then look at and understand two key things about this function. The first is the range. So we're going to tell them we want to know how many employees we have, say for Miami. Now the range is you have to tell the computer where to look. So we chose column H. So you click on employee data, column H, which is this, or the store or city location, and that really is a city where it is, and close that, come back to it. And what happened is you see we had column H there, and that was the city. Now the criteria just needs to be parameterized where you choose Miami. So you simply click on it as opposed to type Miami in, because that would be dead entry and not very dynamic. And then really for choosing this, the range for this, because count is just going to count. It's not going to do anything else. You simply just click the city. So therefore, and it shows you have 17. Now that's how you do the first one. The syntax is very similar. Now total salary, we'll do the same thing. You see it yet again, range. But this one's a little different. Look, it has sum range. So what are we trying to do here? We're trying to sum total salary by city. So this business has stores in each one of these cities. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the employee data in column H again, right, which is the qualifying one. It shows you where all the stores are, right? Vero Beach, Miami, Key West, Naples. Then we're going to use the criteria in A3. So the key is to sum it for each store. So if you want to do a report to understand how effective your employees are, and we'll turn to how much you have to pay them in salary, and hopefully you can merge that with revenue data later on, you'll be able to do that. So the first range is really the criteria range, the range you want to look in to see where Miami is in that regard. The second range is the employee data range. In this case, you're summing salary. So let's take a look at salary. Salary is in this column here. And I click the column so that we don't have to really worry about the references. This is the data range. And then we have the average salary, which is an average if. Same thing, the criteria range, A3, and what are we averaging? We're averaging the salaries. So those are those three. So that completes the if section. So COUNTIF, SUMIF, AVERAGEIF. Now at this section, the IFS, you're going to have two things. These are all IFS calcs. It's going to be COUNT-IFS, SUM-IFS, AVERAGE-IFS. We're going to do two conditions here. Now the IFS allows us to do more than one condition. Condition 1 is going to be the city like before. We should actually change that now to name, it's not really a store, it's city. Makes it more convenient for us to clean up this data. Is that city and job status. Job status, are they full-time employees, part-time employees? We just really need to know. And we can change it by parameterizing like we did in the last equation. You can change these and get the report to dynamically update. So the first is count IFS, sum IFS, average IFS. Let's take a look at the syntax for each one of these. We're doing the count first. So it's the function builder, the count IFS. Well, now this one's a little bit different. The count IFS is a more modern formula. It's been updated. So it says criteria range. Well, that's helpful because it tells you that. And then that's the range we'll look in to see whether it meets the Miami criteria. So let's take a look at that. It's city, which we changed to a field name, which was good. Then it's cell A3. And then the second criteria, look at this. So the first one, this is different than the other one because it has criteria 1 and then criteria 2. Criteria 2 is going to be the employee data, or column I. And if you, I'll just do it again. Column I, if you go over here, that's going to be the job status, whether they're full-time or part-time employees. And now you see the answer comes back 16, and we're done. So very similar. Now let's take a look at this the syntax here for the IFS here. This IFS syntax is a little different. Here we have sum range. Now it starts opposite of how the count IFS works. The sum IFS and average IFS are identical, except for one averages and one sums. But they always start with the range, sum range. Well, this is the action we want to do, the range we want to sum, the values we want to aggregate. Then it has criteria range and criteria. So A3, yet again, Miami. So the criteria is always important that way. So the criteria here that we're doing is we're summing for Miami. It's the criteria. Now the second criteria is employee data, which we just showed you as job status. And the criteria for that is in F3, which right here is job status. So you're able to do that. So the sum range is the salaries. The criteria 1 range, or where the cities are. The criteria is A3 designating Miami. The employee data, it pops out. If you go employee data, this will be the second criteria. We'll just wipe that out for fun. And we expect that to be job status, right? Because we're doing the second condition. Click the whole column. And now we're able to get the total salary. And then on the average if, it's exactly the same, except it says average range rather than sum range. But all the criteria are exactly the same. And therefore you're able to complete the average if. So if you do these properly, because you did the whole column, you can just copy them down and they will automatically go down. And you won't have to worry about name ranges or any of those things. Copy it down because doing a whole column doesn't cause a shift. Now, nested if or. Well, the way I like to do a nested if or is in 2 parts. So in this case, we want let's do the average IFS that we just saw. We're going to do this based on years of service. So employee data, EE, let's take a look at the years of service data. The years of service data are in the first column here, E. The criteria range is the city like we saw before. The criteria is still Miami because we're on the Miami row. Then the next criteria here is 2. Remember, this is a double criteria. It's both city and job status. Same as before, we do the job status. And then F3, which is the job status right here, it gives you a result of 4.6. Make sure that if you're in the wrong, put commas in here, make sure it has 2 decimal points, and you're good to go. Now let's close that. Let's take a look at this if or. And I'm going to clear the true value for a second, just for illustrative purposes, put a 1 and 0. The 1 and 0 are really placeholders. Now the way this works is the or condition is you have to type in or, simple if formula that we've done before, if this, then that. So we go, instead of the logic case, we go or, open parenthesis, B3 greater than O3. See if we can drag this box over. And O3 are my limits, right? O3 is right here. And then it goes D3, which is the average salary, greater than P3, which is right there. If that value is true, put a 1. If the value is false, put a 0. Now that was great, right? We did that. But we want to really nest this formula. I mean, we could go in here and just say simply make this equal to M3, and that would just equal the formula we created, and it would give me the right value. It's not really what I want to do, though. I want to nest it. I put this in nesting because sometimes when you nest a formula, it's better to go over to the formula. I build them in two pieces. I put the if in one side, the average on the other side. I copy this. I hit the X to close it. I come back where my placeholder is, whether it was a 1 or an M3. I paste in that whole formula. I say done. And that way I can build a formula pretty effectively. Because we don't always get to build formulas where we have two formulas to support one build. So sometimes it's nicer just to nest the formula inside. I hope this video is helpful. Just keep in mind that ifs are very different than IFS, because a sum if gives single criteria and IFS gives multiple criteria. A nested if or gives either criteria in that regard. I hope this was a good example for nesting and everything.